Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor Martinez, for the introduction and for hosting this wonderful crowd at this very historic event. Your commitment, Mayor, to economic development in Brownsville consistently recognizes the U.S. Mexico border as a vehicle for growth for the people, for the workers, and the businesses of our cities. I want to acknowledge Congressman Hinojosa, who joins us from his district just next door. As a local business owner, long before his time in Congress, he understands firsthand the importance of global trade and strong U.S. Mexico ties to companies and communities across the region. I would be remiss if I did not mention Congressman Vela, who was unable to join us today, who has been a very strong advocate in getting the West Rail facility open. I also want to thank our U.S. government colleagues from Customs and Border Control, from the Department of State, the Department of Transportation, and I want to offer specifically my special thanks to my colleagues and my friends from Mexico, Secretary Vidaguray, Secretary Meade, and Secretary Esparza. We have worked very closely together. This has been a personal passion for us to get this project and the others along the border done, demonstrating how important it is that our borders work for all of the businesses on both sides of the border. Each of these departments have been integral to the completion of the West Rail project, and we could not have reached this momentous occasion without the participation of so many here. Everyone here today appreciates that the U.S. and Mexican markets are inextricably linked, and that this region is the staging point for the vast majority of our bilateral commercial activity. Nearly $1.5 billion of goods cross between the United States and Mexico each and every day. And approximately 80% of the U.S.-Mexico goods trade crosses our border via road and rail. And U.S. imports from Mexico contain 40% U.S. content, which means the U.S. and Mexico, we make things together. And these goods often are going back and forth across the border many times before we have a final good that we might sell to one another or we may sell to some other part of the world. Put simply, our shared border is already an essential artery of prosperity for both our countries, but we need to do everything we can to make sure that it's up to the task of the 21st century, given the volume of trade that we do between ourselves today. One reason for the exponential growth in our bilateral commerce is the North American Free Trade Agreement. Since the implementation of NAFTA, total trade between our countries has expanded sixfold. This rapid expansion has created jobs and opportunity on both sides of the border and made our region far more competitive in the global economy. However, the associated increase in commercial activity has put an overwhelming strain on our transportation infrastructure and our land ports of entry. Our commercial crossings are not modernized following the completion of NAFTA, which means that we are still using infrastructure that was built for roughly a quarter of the current trade volume. And the congestion at our borders will only become more acute once we finalize and implement the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So the conclusion is obvious. In an increasingly globalized economy, our collective competitiveness depends on our ability to replace outdated infrastructure and continue to develop a modern, efficient, and secure border. This is why we are prioritizing the development and execution of border infrastructure projects under the U.S.-Mexico high-level economic dialogue. We've already made progress. You've heard about the progress that we've made. For example, at the port of entry in San Diego and Tijuana, the busiest land crossing in the world. We reduced wait times from 3 hours to 30 minutes. At the Nogales-Mariposa port of entry, we recently completed a project that more than doubles the facility's capacity. The structure is now able to handle about 4,000 trucks a day, up from about 1,600, and process up to $35 billion of goods a day. Today, we take another step forward as we inaugurate the West Rail Bypass, the first new railway crossing linking the United States and Mexico in more than a century. Completing this project required a Herculean effort from the United States and Mexican leaders at the federal, state, and local levels, as well as our private sector partners. Finishing this rail line took over a decade and required overcoming major hurdles. Our teams persevered, and we should be incredibly proud of this project. But we cannot wait another 100 years before we inaugurate the next new bridge or road that connects our two countries. Secretary Vidagraj knows this as well as anyone. In February of 2014, we sat in his office, and as the Secretary described this project, the West Rail Bypass, he said to me, "This is low-hanging fruit." The two of us and many others of you here have focused on driving this project to completion. But we need a process that is not driven solely by the individual personalities here today. We need a strategy that's coordinated, sustainable, and effective. We cannot take a decade to finish a critical piece of infrastructure. In the 21st century, our businesses need more efficiency from our governments. We are working to develop this improved approach in the high-level economic dialogue, consistent with the goals that were articulated by our presidents, President Obama and President Peña Nieto, when they launched our bilateral cooperation in 2013. They want us to realize the vision of North America as the most competitive region in the world, and to make it easier for our companies, yes, our companies on both sides of the border, to do more business together. So thank you all for being here today to officially inaugurate the West Rail Bypass, and for your commitment to keeping the United States and Mexico open for business. Thank you.